Gilbert, how's it going?
Good, Joe. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. So today on the Data Nerd Herd, we have Gilbert Eijkelenboom from the Netherlands. So for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. My name is Gilbert with a very difficult last name. Based in Amsterdam, indeed, like Joe mentioned, the Netherlands. And I have a company, MindSpeaking. We can talk about that later. Excited for the conversation today. And as we talked about in the beginning, before we started recording, let's see where the conversation takes us, because those spontaneous conversations are most interesting to me, and I think also for you, Joe.
Yeah, and I think for the audience too, we definitely take it. I think a different tack than a lot of data shows, data interviews. It tends to be very unscripted. I would say there is no script actually, and it's more fun that way. Plus, I think we have the added benefit of knowing each other sort of vicariously through various chats that we're in, or social media. So it's always fun meeting somebody for the first time and actually having a conversation. So it's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, how did you, I kind of rewinding all the way to, the start of your data career, like what got you into data? Walk me through that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. My university background was not in the data field, actually, because I studied behavioral science, because what I really loved is psychology and how people make decisions, how they arrive at those decisions, and how that process works. So that fascinated me, and how people work together. But when I started my career, I also wanted to do something very analytical, because in high school, my best subjects were mathematics and physics, and that's what I loved. So I also wanted to do more with those type of skills. And that's why I decided to start my career in technology, data analytics. And that's how I grew in the field. But at the same time, I also noticed that, just analytical skills were not enough. And I also need to develop other types of skills, soft skills. And while developing that, I found it so interesting how that worked and how important it is, that I also wanted to help other people develop those skills. So next to my consulting career in data analytics, I also developed myself as a trainer, helping other people grow, because that's what I'm passionate about. And yeah, that's how I grew into that field.
That's really interesting. Those are a lot of skills, by the way, to develop. I mean, you're developing the hard skills and the soft skills. That's I think, and I think you'll kind of touch on this too, but it seems like people kind of gravitate towards one or the other, right? Like I think it's rare that you find somebody who's good at the analytical kind of the hard skills, so to speak, and also has great soft skills. I mean, walk me through that progression. Why did you realize that soft skills were important? It seems like something that's a lot of people overlook that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something I bumped into because I realized it was 2014. I was doing this presentation, or at least I was asked to do a presentation for a management team. And first, of course, I need to do some analysis, some digging into the data. And I was passionate about it. And I was fascinated with the insights that I had, and also all the analysis that I had done. So I went to the meeting. I had my recommendations. I thought they were clear. So it's clear which avenue we would take it. But then in that meeting, then it totally didn't go my way. And I had my recommendations, but nothing happened with it. And it left me kind of frustrated and wondering, okay, what happened in that meeting? I thought everything was so clear. I've done all the analysis. I have all the data. But in that meeting specifically, there was one person who bounced off all my ideas. And I thought, okay, he would be adopting my recommendations. So I learned after talking to my mentor. He also asked me some questions, and I realized, okay, I probably did not spend enough time understanding what is important for them. And yes, of course, those insights, maybe they were good, maybe they were right, maybe I was right, but I did not present them in a way that was relevant for my audience. And I did not talk to them before, to get the buy-in, because I think that's a big lesson for me and for many data professionals, is not to present something in that big meeting hoping that everyone will agree, but also do your work before and get their buy-in, get their ideas. So the end product is not just yours, but also bought in by the other people.
Mm-hmm. it seems like really, I almost consider this a rite of passage for data people, actually, where, when you start out, I know I've done this, when I was starting out too, you want to show off how smart you are, I think. And also, trying to add value, but in the way that you probably were trained to do it in school, honestly. If you come from like a math background or any sort of like science background, it's always like, well, just, the data comes first. I don't care about how you feel or your opinions. Let's just bombard you with information and go from there. I remember, the first time I did this, I gave I think I was just showing my boss, he was a CEO of a company. He was showing him a report, and he's like, look, when I ask for the time, don't tell me how to make a watch, just tell me the time. Right. And so I think that was humbling. But at the same time, I think a really good learning experience in that way too.
Yeah.
But
And how did it proceed for you after the realization, after that insight?
I mean, I think similar to you in some ways, where I started realizing, okay, so it isn't just about, I realized it isn't just about me, right? Like I think as an analyst or data scientist in early, it's all about what you want to do and what you want to convey. But as you point out, like, you're not getting the buy-in, you're not trying to understand your audience, you're not trying to understand their needs. And I think this isn't really taught in school. Like I teach at a university and I teach, analytics program, and we try and convey this, in our teachings, but I don't know that this is maybe in a capstone project that's taught, but for the most part, people are left to kind of wing it. And I know this isn't taught in the math department for sure. So
yeah, and I think it's a mistake that we make by not including that in the education. And to take it even broader, yeah, I think there's a lot of human skills, life skills, soft skills, however you want to name them. But I think there are a lot of skills that we just need to figure out, like not problem solving, but conflict resolution, negotiation, persuasion. All those skills are really important in our lives, whether it's in our professional lives or personal lives when you're in a conflict with your spouse. But if you don't have those skills, you're gonna have a hard time. And I think we should include those skills in our education and also in a data curriculum, because the data doesn't speak for itself, even though we would love to that to happen.
yeah, definitely. I mean, so how would you go about teaching this to somebody then? Somebody who's coming from a kind of a rigorous, hard skills analytical background. I mean, what is there a progression where you start out with teaching people kind of the softer skills? What's the Gilbert way of doing things?
Yeah, I like the question, because I believe in a different route compared to technical skills, because technical skills you can learn faster. It takes longer to adopt those softer skills, those human skills, because you need to practice a lot. You need to get out of your comfort zone. And what many data professionals love is coding and doing the analysis. But talking to a difficult stakeholder or doing a presentation might be more challenging. And what I believe is fundamentally important is to put in practice what you learned and have many steps, because you're building new habits, right? You're building new behavioral patterns or algorithms, as I name them. And slowly they adopt over time, but you cannot expect to do one presentation and be a presentation rock star. And of course, that's what technical skills as well. You also need to practice, you need to put in the hours, but especially with soft skills, there seems to be a more progressive, more granular steps in that process.
I mean, is it one of the things where there's kind of like a one size fits all, like first skill that somebody needs to know if they're starting from nothing, or does it depend on the person?
I think it really depends on the person.
Okay.
Of course, I have in my training program, I have several steps outlined. And what is important is that it's not just one session and that's it, right? So I have one session and then 1 month in between where people receive small pieces of content and are encouraged to put in practice what they've learned. So in the next conversation with a stakeholder, try to ask these questions. Or when you're doing a presentation, try to get in the buy-in before. So all those kinds of small steps people need to embed in their system, because it's about behavior. That's why it takes longer.
I noticed that you touch on mindset a lot too.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is that to developing soft skills.
Yeah, I think it's very important because mindset is what it all starts with. And I think an important mindset for data professionals is that you're not doing this alone, right? Even though you're the person getting the insights, you need to co-create with the business because they have some information that you don't know about. And even though some people are making fun of the marketeer who knows about marketing but not about data, that marketeer does have some business insights that you need to use, and you need to understand what is important to his or her job. So so that's an important mindset, to have this co-creation mindset, and also to not be too eager to be right. You touched upon this in the beginning, because if you're too eager to be right, then you get into not into a collaboration, but more in proving your point, and that's not really working out.
No, I see this happening a lot too. I think it's, and again, maybe it's the way that hard skills are taught in university and then probably lower, grades as well, probably secondary school. But it's like, and I see people, with saying this too, like it's all about the data and it's all about the facts and stuff. But I think, as being a behavioral, study behavioral science, it's like that people don't respond that way at all. Like
No.
you always. Ego is a big part of it, right? And like feeling like you came up with the idea, feeling like you have a sense of ownership of the idea. Like I found these are actually the most important things. I study a lot of negotiation as well, and because I really want to understand. Okay, so like what would be the easiest path to communicating with somebody, and typically it's winning them over, but also making them feel like everything is their idea the entire time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that helps a lot, because otherwise you're forcing your perspective on someone else, and that doesn't really work normally. People get resistant, and you also need to understand as a data professional that human beings are so irrational. You kind of have the best data, the best insights, but that doesn't mean people are going to listen. And if you want to influence people in a positive way, if you want to make them understand that your insights are important, you need to understand that they make decisions based on emotions, mostly on emotions. And of course they want to justify with the data, but yeah, if you don't affect their primal brain instead of just only the rational brain, it's hard to influence that.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to know what's in it for me, right? Like that's kind of how it is. It doesn't really work the other way around. I found like as much as we want to think that people, I think, are altruistic, for example, and they can be, but first you got to satisfy like the inner condition of, well, like how am I going to benefit from this, especially in a job, right? Because it's unfortunately the reality of a lot of workplaces is promotions and organizational dynamics is very much, I wouldn't say very much, but it can be a zero-sum game in a lot of cases. Like you're getting ahead at somebody else's expense. That's how it is. So
true. And I think you can benefit from that as a data professional by understanding, hey, this director wants to make a promotion, and to in order to get there, he needs to have this algorithm or these insights, and these can help him make that step that he wants to take. So if you think about it that way, you can also frame it that way and help him get that promotion, and also help use those facts to sell your insights.
Right. You brought up the word sales too. I mean, like walk me through some, I guess, sales techniques for selling. Your what I guess we back up and ask a different question. Like, what is a data professional selling?
Yeah, depends a bit on the exact role, but if a data professional has certain insights, then you're selling the value that those insights have, so that those insights matter. So as your job as a data professional is to get value from data, so you need to prove to others that the insights matter, and collaborate with people so that you get the right information, the business understanding, so that you can get the best insights, because you cannot get those by yourself. So selling and sometimes also selling the value of data in general. I think every data professional has a role in the path to data literacy, right? Because there are still people who don't want to touch Excel or let alone R or Python, because they say that's for the technical folks, right? So I think that's also a role of the data professional, to sell the importance of data and to sell that everyone should play a role in that.
How do you teach data literacy in an organization?
Yeah, I think there comes down to several parts. One of them is, of course, that everyone can read data, understand what it means, and also use it to analyze and present. Depending on the role, of course, the executive is not really analyzing the data, just gets the data and makes decisions. So that's one. And I think the other big component of it is culture, data culture, because, and a large part of that is understanding how to embed data in every piece of the organization and every process. Because what often happens in many organizations is that, for example, the sales organization says, okay, we're going to increase the price. Okay, it's going to happen tomorrow, and now we want to know what's the impact, right? What's the impact on the landing page, the visitors, the conversion? But they get with that question, they come with the question way too late. So it needs to be all the way up front. Mm-hmm. So I think this is also part of the data culture.
Interesting. I mean, so one thing I see often, I'm sure you have too in your career, is the person who's very, I would say, gut driven, and they're kind of like, well, I mean, it's all up here. Or, I've been here long enough. I know what I'm doing. I don't need your data, or you. So, I mean, how would that be? How would that person? What are some effective ways of dealing with a person like that who might just be very stubborn?
Yeah, I like the question. What I would do not is become defensive and overly hard sell how important data is, but I would ask a lot of questions. So like, hi, what are your goals this year? How are you achieving those goals? And asking a lot of questions about his goals, and understand what are those and how he wants to achieve those. And I think once you ask a lot of questions, you will also slowly see how important the role of data is and how data can help him achieve those goals. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a fine balance, because typically the person who's saying that has also been in the organization for a long time, because they developed the intuition. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be weird to have somebody who just started say, well, yeah, I know this business really well, like, because they wouldn't, and it would be, yeah. So, I mean, so typically you're dealing with somebody who's got a lot of domain knowledge and expertise in that area. And they probably have built a lot of internal, respect and maybe kingdoms as well. And so this is, mm-hmm. It presents a very interesting challenge. I do agree. Like, you don't want to go toe to toe with this person at all. That's the dumbest thing you could do, because you'll probably lose your job, or you're going to be, I would say, de-emphasized in such a way that you're off to Siberia. And then at that point, like, you should just go find another job somewhere, because you're not going to be effective in your role, right? You're effective in your role when you can gain trust of people and so forth. I mean, I had, I worked with somebody like that who, was very distrustful of everybody in the company. For some reason, he listened to me. I don't know why, but I think it was because I was just a really straight shooter. And I was like, you don't have to listen to me, but here's what's going on. And I think by being very candid and just saying, look, I respect, where you're coming from. But this is what's going on in your business. You can choose to listen to me. You can choose to ignore it. And after, I think, maybe taking that tack, it tended to work. He's like, okay, this guy's doesn't really have an agenda. He's not trying to undermine me. He's just here to, to basically try and help me out. And I think by gaining that trust, at least I was able to, I think, be effective.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good strategy, because if you get defensive and get toe to toe, it doesn't work. But you need to get slowly win his trust, and of course because of course we can pretend that even the most data-driven companies, right? There are a lot of people who still make decisions based on gut feeling, and it's also logical, because it's rarely the case that we have all the information, even though we can analyze everything. At the end, the final decision that we make is not binary, right? It's not yes or no. It's not 1 or 0, never. And especially for the more complex decisions, it's always a bit of gut feeling as well. And of course, the data is there to support. And I think it's important for leaders and everyone in the organization to appreciate the value of data. But we also need to understand that most of the decisions are still based on a mix of rational information and some gut feeling.
Yeah, and I would say the gut feeling definitely stems from the fact that the world is very probabilistic, right? Like if it were that easy, you would just use Excel and you wouldn't have to have any sort of decision. It would already be done for you, right?
Exactly.
So because you live in a very linear, deterministic world, and unfortunately, the world is the exact opposite of that. Like I would say, maybe a small percentage of it is is deterministic, but for a large part of it, you're dealing with very random cycles that interplay with each other, and so by default, you have to be comfortable making decisions, based upon data, but I would say also based upon a lot of uncertainty. And it's funny when I talk to data professionals too, because they're like, yeah, I know for a fact this is going to happen. It's like, do you really know for a fact that that's maybe in a short time window? Sure. But, as time goes on, I would say the probability of absolute certainty decays over time, because that's just how the world works. And so, you especially see this in forecasting.
Yeah.
Right. Where I'm trying to forecast out 2 years of sales, for example. And like that's more of like goal setting at that point, because you can't tell me that with 100% under perfect conditions that you're going to hit your goal, even as you projected it, let alone under, in 2019, everyone had goals for their businesses. And I'm pretty sure, in 2020, a lot of those were revised, maybe upwards or downwards, but
absolutely. This is also what Annie Duke talks about. I haven't read a book yet, but I saw the conversation of Annie Duke, former professional poker player, on the podcast of Harpreet Sahota.
Shout out to Harpreet, by the way. Yeah,
shout out to Harpreet. Great podcast. And she has been talking a lot about the probabilistic world and the fact that we cannot predict everything, and we're really overconfident, and we have a lot of biases, right, in our decision making and thinking, that we have a hard time understanding and seeing ourselves. But we make those mistakes all the time. And I think she has a really interesting perspective, because she looks at decisions in life in a poker way as well, where you either you bet on a hand or not, and depending on the outcome, imagine I'm betting on getting a flush, right? So getting a 5th hearts card, so that I have five hearts and a flush. But I'm betting on that, but I'm not sure what's going to be the outcome. So when that 5th heart card arrives, I'm thinking, okay, it was the right decision. But it's not necessarily the case, right? Maybe the odds were against me. Maybe it was not a wise investment. If I invest in Twitter early, probably a good idea. That's what we're thinking. But still, we think so, because it ended up as a success. And even though we were successful, doesn't mean it was the right decision. But maybe the probabilities were such that the best decision was otherwise, or there was an even better decision that we're not considering at the moment.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. Speaking of poker, I mean, you used to be a professional poker player, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Awesome. I'll have to dive into that in a bit. I'm fascinated by this because it's, and to kind of bring it back to the bets thing for a bit, right? I mean, why do you think it is, though, that, because I see this in data quite often, where people are, as you say, very certain, about outcomes and about their predictions and so forth. How would you teach somebody to balance, their quote certainty, against the fact that the world is it's a very chaotic place, actually. So, I mean, the chance of your
Yeah,
decision, like being isolated to a vacuum, I would say is quite small. But
absolutely. I think the easiest way is to show people their own decisions, and then look at the outcomes, and how ask them how certain they were that this outcome would arrive. And when analyzing your past decisions, it's difficult because you cannot really transform to that moment. But if you journal every now and then, that's what I do. I learned it from, I'm not sure, an author. I'm not sure which author. Doesn't matter. Uh, to journal on every big decisions that you make.
mm,
So you write down your thought process, and based on that, you're able to look back and, hey, this is what I thought. This what the outcome was. As I just mentioned, that doesn't mean that that outcome is, if you this is the outcome you wanted, then it's the right decision. But at least you have some more information about the situation afterwards, right? And this is how you can learn about your own thought process or about your own biases by journaling in that moment,
mm.
to write down your thought process, and then later learn when you know more about the situation. And this is how we can learn more about our biases. And it's very tricky because it's also untangible and fluffy almost. But it's important to become more aware of our biases.
I think it is. This is really interesting, actually, because I read a lot of biographies and even journals from famous people. Ronald Reagan's journals, actually, a bit ago, or his diary, and that was interesting because it talked about how he was dealing with events now. Now that they happen, it's kind of like, oh, that was obvious. But at the time, he was just dealing with a ton of uncertainty and in the world, and if you look back on history too, you read diaries from people who were going through World War II, for example, or just any historic conflict. It's like they had no idea what was going on. You're just kind of taking it day by day, and that kind of thing. So
I think it's fascinating about books that you're able to climb into the head of an author, right, and to learn from another perspective. I think it helps to become more empathetic as well, because we touch upon the fact that we're in our own heads caring about what we want, right, and only understand our thought process. But I think books and also travel help to expand
big.
your horizon and to understand that there are more perspectives. And even though you can say, okay, I'm quite open, I can relate to many people in the US or the Netherlands or Canada, there are so many people in the world and so many perspectives. And I think taking this humble approach and understanding there's a lot of perspective also helps us in the small data world to understand there's not one truth, because there are so many ways to look at data, and we need that information to gain value from it.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at different cultures too, like the Asian cultures tend to have longer perspective on things, just kind of how it is. And that, I think that also determines like how you're going to behave, both as a company and as a society and so forth. I mean, you can you compare Western society to like what China right now. China, I would say, has a lot of pros and a lot of cons, but they do things a lot differently. And I'm not saying it's just different, right? They take a very long-term perspective. They got time on their side. They don't have, like in the US, you have 4-year elections for president, 2-year elections for Senate, and that's your time horizon, right? And then if you're a company, you're going to be thinking in terms of what's the next quarter, right? I don't care about 10 years from now. That's not how. It was a Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner. He had a really good thing, a really good quote I always remember. It's like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Basically meaning like, if you're a CEO, you how you're compensated, how you're incentivized to behave and how you're going to be paid is how you're going to behave. So
exactly,
that's simple.
Incentives are everything. Yeah, and I think it's in organizations, once we're more aware of the incentives at play in the data world or business world, that also helps us perform better and get more value out of data, because we can get to the insights, but only once it's implemented, the recommendations are there, or the algorithm is used. If you don't understand the end users, then it will take off.
What I found interesting too, I was talking to somebody the other day who works at a very big a very big company, I'll say. If I mentioned the name, you'd know immediately. And he runs a data team. And I thought this was interesting, where he actually intentionally wanted his team to stay in Excel and not learn R or Python, because he felt like that was they're gonna leave. So so his only way of retaining people was to kind of hold them, keep them on a certain platform and skill set and so forth. I thought that was really interesting, because I'm not sure what his incentives were, but it was obvious one of them was probably not having to go and try and hire more people. So I thought that was really
And
fascinating.
he wanted to keep people on Excel on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it was afraid that people would develop to a certain level and then leave.
Yep.
Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not because he thought that was the best way to gain business value from data.
Exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really believe in that.
Same. Not my approach, but it's an interesting approach, I guess. So yeah. This is at a company that if I told you the name, you'd be like, oh, they're probably the most data-driven companies in the world, right? Like they're so forward-thinking and so forth, and that's what kind of shocked me about the whole discussion. But at the same time, if I'm in his shoes and and hiring's tight, being practical, I might say, well, maybe he's right under that certain circumstance, but it's at the expense of, I think, of a lot of other things like team growth and so forth, right? So
that's what I wanted to ask. What's the impact on team growth and people's development, right? And if he doesn't want people to leave by keeping them small or making them use certain tools they don't want to use, maybe. I'm curious what's the morale of those people, right? If you keep them small, are they not going to leave?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting. Kind of switching gears a bit. I mean, you started a business recently. Is it MindSpeaking?
Yeah, MindSpeaking.
That's awesome. Yeah. Walk me through that whole progression. I mean, going from working for somebody else to being your own CEO. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. And of course, you can relate to those steps some time ago. It started a few years ago, where I thought about that I would love to work for myself and do my own thing. And of course, that's what many people say. And what I loved about that idea is that I have the freedom to do exactly what I'm passionate for and what I'm good at. And I can only write my own job description if I'm being my own boss, right? So that's really what I wanted to do, to have the biggest contribution that I can have in the world. But I was always a bit lost, I love psychology and I loved data, but how should they be combined? But then before I went on a trip around the world, I played with the idea to give training to data professionals, but it was not so concrete yet. I talked to a coach who helped me a lot by asking questions. And then I went on a trip around the world. It was before COVID, so 2.5 years ago.
Good timing.
And it was great timing. I'm incredibly lucky for being able to finish that trip as well. And during that trip, the first 2 months I didn't do much. I was traveling to nice places, to Japan and Vietnam and New Zealand. And while in New Zealand, I spoke to some people. They told me, hey, you need to write more. I've read some of your blogs and you really need to write more. And that encouraged me to do so. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna write 20 pages, just a PDF document to inspire people and to write down what I have had learned until then, sharing what I know about people skills, about soft skills for data professionals, for analytical type of people like me. And quickly they started to grow and grow and grow, and it was 50 pages. And then I thought, okay, who's gonna read 50 pages? How am I gonna distribute this? So I was thinking a lot, overthinking, all the scenarios on the table, and I didn't really proceed it. So I decided, okay, stop the overthinking. I've done that enough. Let's throw out all the thinking and just write, brained up. And soon it started to grow more and more. And then I started to engage with an editor and another editor. So those two people helped me a lot to structure the book, and because eventually it grew into a book. And the book was also the kickoff of my business. And I started to self-publish. And first I thought, should I really self-publish, because it's difficult, right? I don't have a publisher. But I spoke to some people, some authors, and many told me that they were quite disappointed with the marketing efforts of their publisher. So yeah, I don't want to discourage you, because I know you
Well.
you're on a different path. But that's what I heard, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna self-publish.
Cool.
And yeah, and then slowly I started to, and once I came back from that trip around the world, I started my own business, MindSpeaking. And yeah, it's about soft skill training for data professionals. So it's a fantastic experience. And to your question, long story short, back to your question, it's really cool. It's rewarding to do something that I'm supposed to do, and to get up every day and with a blank piece of paper and design what my next steps are. That's what I've always been doing in my career as well. A lot of side projects and things I worked on that gave me a lot of fulfillment. So I'm very passionate that I can do the same right now full time.
It's really cool. Yeah, congrats on making the jump, and I would say more importantly, congrats for sticking it out and surviving too. So I think you've sort of about to reach that threshold where I think a lot of people have a second opinion and they're like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, it's tough because of course with entrepreneurship there are a lot of doubts as well. Like, hey, am I the right person to bring this? Are people waiting for wanting me to do this? Is there business for this? But I think again, it comes a lot down to the mindset. Do you have a scarcity mindset or abundance? And how you think matters a lot. And
it's everything. You can be your own worst enemy. I still go through days like this for the most part. It's I mean, we've been around a bit longer, so it's kind of we have objectives, right? But at the same time, it's like, damn, it's just sometimes it's like those bad action movies where there's just like people coming at you like left and right, and you just having to take care of them all.
How do you deal with that?
For me, it's I do a lot of mind maps and kind of brain dumps. So just everything on your mind, put it on paper. It doesn't do you any good to internalize things. I would say, like, get everything out on your, literally, even the smallest things. Like, I need to go take my dog for a walk, whatever it is. All these little stressors, they build up. And so you need to get them out on paper. I got this from David Allen's Getting Things Done way back in the day. He has a really good point with stress and with just a lot of things on your mind. I suppose just the sheer volume. Like, the only way you're going to get this figured out is to get everything out of your brain and somewhere else, because tasks have no sense of time or space. They just accumulate, because until they're done, right, you can attach a timeline to stuff, but it really doesn't matter. You have to actually like physically like say, okay, I'm going to get, here's everything that's on my mind, start prioritizing it. And even by getting things out, like you just probably realize, like, I don't even need to do this. This is stupid. Or just go delegate it, or just, forget about it and just not do it ever. So that's how I deal with it. Because there's just a sense of, because it's like when you're in business, especially the number of things you have to do, it never shrinks. It always grows.
Yeah. So. Yeah. You need to cut stuff as well. Otherwise it's just growing. And I tend to overcommit as well to write down too many things. I use the same method by David Allen, and works very well, because once it's out of your head, it's such a relief, isn't it? And it helps me to bring more clarity to what's most important, because every day there's so many things. And you mentioned before in the LinkedIn chat, E-Myth Revisited, a really good.
Oh, E-Myth, yep, great book.
Revisit, yeah, about entrepreneurship. I like that. Yeah,
that's key. Yeah, the main notion for the audience is, if you have a business, or even if you don't, like, work on the business, don't work in it. So try and find ways you can hand hats off to people, or just automate, or just don't do it. You have that option too. I would say inactivity is also a choice. Ignoring things is a choice, and sometimes it's the best choice.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people, I would say, my inbox is full of people trying to get my attention, and I ignore a lot of emails these days. It's not because I don't like the person or anything, but I just, what they have to offer is not what I'm into. And I could choose to engage. Maybe it's bad of me. I don't know. But at the same time, I only have so many good decisions I can make each day. And the time I devote to like, other people's attention, it sometimes cuts into decisions.
Yeah, for sure. That doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, if you would engage with those people, even though it's not the right way to go, then you have less time to work on projects. You can bring so much more value, right? And bring so much more to business and the world. So
yeah, what were the biggest things, what were your what most surprised you, I suppose, before you started your business and now that you've been running it? Is there any revelations?
Good question. Yeah, one thing, many people, some people ask me, hey, do you really want to do this by yourself? Do you really want to start your business on your own? Because they said, hey, aren't you the person who loves to work together and do things together? And that's what made me think a lot. But I still decided to start by myself because I didn't have a business partner who had the same ambitions or the same thoughts. And I was really curious how it would feel, if it would feel lonely on this path. And actually, so far, it doesn't feel lonely at all. And in fact, I feel more connected to other people professionally than any other moment in my career, because with people like you and other entrepreneurs and people that work on something they love and are passionate about is so rewarding. So that really surprised me that it doesn't feel lonely at all, even though I don't have any colleagues on paper. Of course, I work together with people who do some administration or easier tasks that I outsource, but also with all the other entrepreneurs and people I contact in a professional manner. It feels very connecting. So that's the most surprising.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
How does it feel? How is it for you? Because when you started your company, how did it go?
I mean, I'd always been told that everything is going to take 3 times longer than you think it is, and I think that part is I think that was single-handedly probably the best thing that kept me sane, because I'm very impatient for the most part. Like I just want things done now. Like why can't you just get things done now? Why do I have to wait? That's my approach to everything. So things take a long time. It takes a long time to build. I would say it takes a long time to build a brand. It takes a long time to build credibility. It takes a really long time to build a sales pipeline. An unbelievable amount of time. I mean, we were lucky where we had partners, great partners that, we could collaborate with and work on our behalf, and vice versa. We worked on their behalf and helped them get to where they are too. But, partnerships are everything, I would say too. That's the other piece. Like even if you're solo, like I think you're realizing too, like you can't really go it alone. Having people to talk to, having people to inspire you, people to collaborate with, like that's what business literally is. It's a collection of people, fulfilling what they're best at and serving other people, with those benefits. But, so I think that's like the other thing too, is you assume when you start out, like, oh yeah, we can just do everything ourselves and stuff. But like, even with you, it's, collaborating and talking to people. It's like, you could talk to yourself all day. That'd be a crazy conversation. But like, it's just,
that makes total sense.
Yeah. I mean, so, but the other thing too, I realize is that, businesses, depending on the business that you're in, right? In some cases, I think it is a zero-sum game. In other cases though, I think in more knowledge work like we're in, it's very collaborative. And I would say it's, it's very much more kind of abundance oriented. And I like those kind of games. I don't like zero-sum as much, just personality wise. So, I mean, I'm really good at competing with people, but yeah.
I totally agree. And there are a few people who do similar work that I do, focusing on communication skills in data analytics, like Jason Krantz.
Yep.
And we support each other's work all the time, even though we're, strictly speaking, on paper, we're competitors.
Right.
We both believe that the market is so big, the knowledge world, as you mentioned, it doesn't matter, right? We're both growing, and so it's better for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like those zero-sum games either.
Well, it's better for the customer too, right? Like, if somebody buys Gilbert's course, does that mean like there's no physical way that they can appreciate, Jason's course or Jordan Morrow's course or anything? Of course not. Like, it's silly, right? Like, how many books do you have in your bookshelf right now? Did you just buy one? Like, I can only have one book. That's it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. That makes sense. And you learn from each other as well. You learn from each other perspectives. So the course or the books will both be better. And I was also wondering, because of course in your background you have a lot of music. I know that's a passion of yours. What do you see any similarities between, or do you see any parallels between making music and business entrepreneurship?
I think so, and I think a lot about this. Like, I've always tried to do more creative type pursuits. I think business is no different. It's just one of those things where, there's, when you're still an individual contributor and you think about doing your business, like, I think there's a lot of really bad advice out there, actually. Like, you got to make a business plan and you got to do this and that. And it's like very cookie cutter. And I think to some extent that's important. Like, do spend some cycles thinking about your business, but also think about how you're going to make an impact in the world. Like, what are you trying to change? And I think that, to me, business is almost more a creative endeavor than it is anything else, even more than a money-making enterprise. I think if you're smart and capable, you can make money doing practically anything, frankly. And if you really want to make money, you'd probably go into, selling illicit substances or crypto or something, right? If you want to make money quickly, right? But we aren't doing that. So obviously we're trying to, not just make a quick buck. We're trying to, make an impact given our skills and our, whatever it is we're good at. And to me, business forces you to be creative, I would say, especially if you're bootstrapping, like I assume you are, we did. And bootstrapping forces you to be extremely creative because you have very tight constraints. You don't have an unlimited amount of money that some VC just gave you. It's the opposite problem. And I think it makes you very nimble and very scrappy. What do you think?
Yeah. Although bootstrapping gives a lot of freedom as well, and maybe less stress. I don't know. Yeah, maybe stress. More people that are bootstrapping have more stress about money, but at least they can make their own choices more. I think business is very a creative field indeed, because as mentioned, every day is a blank piece of paper, or every year, however you want to see it. And there are so many choices you want to make, and I think internet makes everything so much easier. I cannot really imagine, I'm 32 years old right now. I cannot really imagine being an entrepreneur in the 70s or 80s without the internet, without an audience, and being able to reach so many people throughout the world. I think I have a lot of respect for those people, cold calling, trying to get physical appointments and then being frustrated about not reaching the right person, or having an appointment and saying, okay, it doesn't really work out. So I think right now we need a really different approach, which is much more my style as well, more organic, because you can create content, things you think are valuable for your audience that you're serving, and then slowly your brand and expertise will grow, and then people will come to you instead of you cold calling all those people. So I'm very happy we're living this age and we're able to reach so many people and having this conversation over the ocean. So
yeah, we would never had this conversation, I don't think, unless we're at a conference or happen to run into each other. I was in Amsterdam maybe, but yeah. Right. How did kind of bringing it back, and kind of closing out, I mean, you used to be a professional poker player as well. I mean, walking through that, and like, how has that helped you with what you're doing?
Yeah, I was about 12 years ago, I was a professional poker player. It started when I was studying. I was passionate. I was always passionate about games. So I learned about poker beyond the things you see in movies with cigars and whiskey and money. So I started out with play money for fake money. So no money on the table. I started to trade that for $10. I don't know. Some people buy that for $10. So that's what I've done a few times. I never deposited, but I slowly grew my my game and up higher stakes. And at some point I thought, okay, when I reach these stakes, it's enough, I don't need to go higher, but still I did want to go higher. And at some point I reached a level where I thought, okay, I want to quit my studies temporarily because this is a big opportunity. I don't want to push this aside. So I had a conversation with my parents. I waited quite long until having that conversation because I thought, okay, I don't want to make them think that I'm a gambling addict and that I'm totally going off course here. So I showed them some consistent winnings over the months, and they said, okay, you go ahead. They were quite supportive, actually.
Cool.
That surprised me. Yeah, and I did that for a full year, and it was really fun. And at that point, I had some friends from Belgium in the poker world. They were moving to Malta, which is so you don't pay any taxes there, gambling taxes. I considered joining, but I thought, okay, the poker world is a bit too narrow for me. There's so much more to explore in the world outside of poker. And then I completely quit poker. I did a board year at a student for fraternity to develop more social skills, right? Because in poker, I was analyzing every decision. And that comes back to your question. What did you learn? I learned a lot about probabilities and making the right choices, giving a set of information, because that's what poker is about.
Yep.
But I was mainly focused on the analytical side. And in real life, of course, I could not calculate every decision. At a birthday party, I could not calculate what I should say next. So I was worrying, is this funny enough? Is this smart enough? And that's why I also realized, okay, I want to work more on those soft skills because they help me in a professional life and also in my personal life.
That's really fascinating. Did you get good at reading people?
Much better. Yeah, because I'm more present. I'm more right now we've been having this conversation for an hour and I've barely been thinking about something else. I'm really into this. And when I'm more focused on other people, I'm much better at reading people than I was 10 years ago.
Interesting. That's fascinating. I'm always reminded just how, most people that we know, especially I think our career paths they don't make any sense actually at all. If you're looking at it on paper, there's not really like, he went to Stanford and then, went to Harvard and, got his MBA there. And now he's, working as a VC or an investment banker, right? Like that's like everyone we know, I think it's a very non-traditional approach and resume that just on the surface, you just like who is this person? Like, why are they here? But, it's cool because all these experiences have really shaped us and I think really built us into who we are today. And you can't replicate that at all.
No, absolutely. And that's also why I appreciate we having this conversation, not just about business, right? Like what do we do, but also more background about personality and what got you here. Because I think it's interesting to know about everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone's got some cool stuff to share. So I know we're coming up on time here. For people who want to learn more about you and MindSpeaking, how would they do that?
Yeah, best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the place where I'm at the most. I post every day there, every weekday. And you can have a look at mindspeaking.com to check out what I do with trainings and presentations on communication skills in data and analytics.
Awesome. Well, Gilbert, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope we can do it again sometime. And best of luck with MindSpeaking. I really love what you're doing with MindSpeaking, and happy to help promote any way I can. So
thanks a lot, Joe.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Cool. All right. Take it easy.
Cheers.
Bye.